has a giant bummer of a title, so I made a subtitle, which is that. Yeah. So, okay, so just for the first few slides is just going to be like making sure we're all kind of on the same page. So firstly, very, very, very brief, condensed, like sort of history of what I remember in the back of my head of Lindy Hop. So basically Lindy Hop kind of developed in like the late 20s through the 30s and kind of into the 40s. A lot of times at the Savoy Ballroom and other ballrooms in Harlem. So one of the first main innovators was Shorty George, who was like the first person I think who's recognized as doing like a swing out and coining the name Lindy Hop. So innovator in that way, who sort of predates Frankie by a little bit, but of course we all know Frankie Manning is the person that these talks are named for. You know, he's a member of Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, innovated air steps, various shapes that he made in dancing that were very new. It was a big part of making the dance exciting, and he was a brilliant choreographer, which came in handy for when Lindy Hop became recognized in films and became part of culture that way, because it was a dance that really lent itself well to performance and social dancing, which of course is the special thing about Lindy Hop. So yeah, and then following the popularity from movies and exposure from that, insane popularity, so crazy, and then you're gonna have more people outside of Harlem doing the dance that we now love.
I love
Lindy Hop. And then, you know, there was sort of like a whole lot of nothing, kind of, for a long time. And then, you know, like a few very determined New Yorkers and Swedes and Brits later, huge international dance scene that we all know and love today. And just in general, sort of structure of American dances that happens very, very frequently. There would be a social dance in a black community, and it would be like theatricalized in some way, whether it's by a Broadway show or in a movie, anything like that, you know? And then it would become a social dance in the white community. And that happened like a lot of the time. Like the first probably big deal one that this happened was Cakewalk. And then, you know, tap, Charleston, Lindy Hop, and most recently hip hop probably. In just sort of a very general way of talking about a lot of different dances. Okay, so, and then, so that's sort of just background of like the situation that we're talking about. But like to actually get into like the core like thing I want to discuss, you need to sort of have some definitions. The first of which is privilege, which I'm going to use this metaphor which I really like, which is that privilege is your difficulty setting. So if you're playing like Guitar Hero or like other games that actual gamers play that I don't play because I'm not a gamer, you have a difficulty setting that you pick at the beginning. You know, you're just like starting out your beginner or master, whatever. The difference with privilege as a difficult setting is that it's preset and you don't really get to change it. You know, you don't determine it, it's just there. It's what you have to cope with. And so ultimately, everyone is playing the same game, but it's just, and you may be, like in some way, doing the same things, but it's harder for a harder difficulty setting, or less privilege. Is that making sense? Okay. So, what that means is a different setting means a different experience. So someone with a different set of privileges than you, or no privilege at all, has a different experience. So you can't use your knowledge of your own experience and like assume that it'll be the same thing for them. So they tell you, you know, like I had this experience, and you're like, well, that wasn't there when I played this game, you know, like I didn't see that monster. You must be making that up. That was crazy. I just went right by that thing. It wasn't hard, you know? Things like that. So, just an example, low difficulty, upper class, straight white dude, you know? High difficulty, low income, queer woman of color in some way. So just some examples of what privilege means. And then secondly, cultural appropriation itself, which is generally most relevant when it's someone who has more privilege appropriating something from a culture with less privilege. And for a more specific definition, it's just you're taking on a specific element of a culture that is not yours by birth. And the reason that this is a problem, or can be a problem, is that you get to create the image that you want to portray. And you take on things that you think are cool, or project a certain image that you like without the added, like, you know, any discrimination or any negative imagery that might go along with that. So it's something, you know, that's important to think about and kind of tricky. So on that note, being that we are all Lindy hoppers and are doing a dance in, like, let's face it, a very, very white community, that was a dance that was developed by black dancers, it's something that we should be aware of and think about, hence this talk. So, being not terrible. Most important thing is to bear in mind is that without respect for the history of this dance, but like not just like the dance itself, but everything that led to the situations that created it, like you're just sort of being a tourist in the same way that someone who was like a fairly affluent, like, white person in New York in the 30s, and you would, like, say, go to the Cotton Club, which was very segregated, and they had black performers, but you couldn't go if you were black. It's like you're experiencing the culture in sort of a sanitized way without, and being like, thinking like, oh, this is exotic and exciting, and doing this thing, without caring about it. You're just sort of being a tourist, you know? And it's just icky, you know? And ultimately, it's more than just thinking that Frankie and Norma and Al and Don Hampton are great, because they are great. But we also have to go beyond that and respect and not discount the experiences or feelings of people who are not old-timers, because racism is still a thing, you know? It didn't go away. So you still have to recognize that that's, you know, something that might affect a person who's just starting out in their Lindy Hop. And most importantly, the distinction to keep in mind is that you can have racist actions without racist intent. So you can have one without the other, is the important thing. You can, like, do something that someone would be like, that's racist, what you said there. But you, like, would never have meant it in that way. And it's maybe because there's something about history or culture that you are aware of, you know, and you're, like, and you're just doing this thing, and you, like, you don't mean to cause harm, but you're causing harm. And at the same time, obviously, you can, like, be racist, but maybe not do anything specifically, but you're still racist inside. So it's a good distinction to keep in mind. And following that, don't be so defensive. And I know it is the worst thing to hear, because if you're upset about something and you've had that said to you, it's just like, it just makes you more upset about whatever you're upset about. But really, just don't be. Because the thing is that if you're in a conversation about anything, particularly if someone's, like, accused you of something, for example, hey, that thing that you did or said was kind of racist, and, like, you are the whole time trying to protect your ego or your self-image or the image of someone that you care about, it, like, gets in the way of self-awareness and honesty and being able to learn and grow. So it's sort of you have to kind of like let go of that. Because like, you could have done something racist. And it's better not to deny that possibility and instead just be like, have an honest discussion. And is not angry. And also, don't just flat out deny it, you know? So, for example, someone says this to you, good idea for a response. You know, oh shoot, I would never do that. I'm so sorry. Would you like to talk about this with me further? If not, that's cool. Bad ideas. I was just joking. And or it was ironic. So example, if I was like, hey everybody, this is my black friend Damon. You know? And someone's like, not cool. And I'm like, but it was ironic. Because, you know, it's still just not cool. You know, it's just not. He's my friend. That's it. You know? Or, I can't be racist because, I don't know, I have my black friend Damon over here. It's like, of course you can't be. You know, like, being friends with people does not, like, absolve you of any future thing that you might do or say. You know, like, you are not the same person as them, and even if you were, it's just, like, it's just this weird, illogical thing that somehow comes up so much is just silly. Or, for instance, you're overreacting. Like, they're just reacting. They're having the reaction they're having. And if it doesn't make sense to you, then find out why. Don't just assume that they're reacting in a way that is somehow bad. Because if you think about that, it's just like a really weird emotion. I mean, like a really weird thing to say about someone else's feelings. Just like, you're having too many feelings, you know? You gotta lock that down because you're reacting inappropriately. And I'm not wrong, you're wrong, you know? Or for instance, no, you're racist. Really dumb, but I swear to God, part of what I did for this talk was like go through a lot of Facebook comments. And I swear that this is an actual pattern that I saw of where people would accuse other people of being racist for noticing / commenting on racism. Like they felt that we should just like move on, and then if we like moved on and didn't comment on it somehow, it would just go away / not exist. And the important thing to remember is that ignoring racism, or really anything unfortunate, is not the same as fixing it or transcending it, you know? So it's, yeah, just silly, that one. You know, along those lines, double standard or reverse racism, which is not a thing, you know? Just like, well, how come you can say this and I can't, you know? It's just like feeling aggrieved when you're in a position of privilege because you can't say certain things without people getting upset about it. It's just silly because no one is trying to say that you can't say those things. They're just saying that if you do, it's upsetting for X, Y, and Z reasons. So it's not a double standard because everyone can say whatever they want, you know? It's just, you know, it's just not gonna go over well always. So, when we are having conversations about tricky topics, potentially, you know, in this case, around racism, I tried to put together a good idea, bad idea thing that would give you some direction in terms of like, not just what not to do, but also what would be a good idea. So, first thing, check your privilege, which is a thing that is a term that, you know, gets thrown around a lot. But basically what it means is, in the context of this conversation, are there privileges that I have? You know, am I someone who had a really good education, for instance? You know, am I white? Am I straight? Whatever. You know, is there some privilege that I have that is relevant to this, that maybe makes me not have experiences that another person might have, that gives them a different perspective on things, you know? So, and try to do that instead of assuming that your life experiences equip you to judge all people and their actions all of the time. Because in most cases, you're going to need some extra information to actually connect with them and then be able to understand a little bit more. So another thing that you can try to do is, you know, really take in a lot of information before you say anything back, particularly if you have a lot of privilege, you know. Instead of trying to immediately force whatever ideas in the front of your head on whoever you're talking to. And especially relevant in the dance scene, you want to actively welcome everyone and just also not be weird about it. For instance, don't treat people differently because you perceive them as different from you. And like, don't make assumptions, I guess is the best way to put it, because when I was preparing for this, I was talking to a friend and he said that he felt when he was starting dancing that people would sort of give him points for being a black guy, you know, like they would, I don't know, give him like extra positive feedback somehow, and he really did not care for it. And that was something that he experienced, and maybe not everyone did, but I was something that I was kind of surprised to hear him say. But in general, don't make assumptions about what people are good or not good at. You know, just like welcome them as a new dancer. Don't be like, hey Sean, you're a dude, you can go chop down that tree, right? Like, and I as a woman can go like cook dinner right now, obviously, because you're a dude and I'm a lady, you know? It's just assumptions, not cool. Just welcome people as people. And I would say that part of what I had in the description for this talk I didn't quite address, but it was that a lot of times we think of Lindy Hop as this like joyful thing, but it came out of a situation that was very painful. Maybe not the like specific time or place in which Lindy Hop was developed, but you know, the whole practice of bringing people to a country against their will and then sort of like imposing a culture of ideas on them. It's just, you know, it's not something that we should ignore just because we love Lindy Hop so much, because the reason that we love it is not because it's like joyful while ignoring things. It's because it's a way for us to experience another person's humanity without like having to talk so much, because talk often gets in the way of us treating each other as people. But when we can still love it, we just have to sort of approach it in a respectful way. And so I think that's all I had to say. So insert part.
So speaking of Facebook comments and the World Wide Web,
Yes.
Lindy Hop, it does have an international aspect to it at this point, and it's really easy to get into discussions about racism with people from other countries. And so I was noticing this in particular several months ago around the performance. Anyway, so what's the best way to talk to someone who has a non-US based racial relations viewpoint? Does that make sense?
I guess it depends on
like
how strident they're being about, like, if they just want to know information, or if they're like, be like, nope, my point of view is right. Or I feel like a lot of times it was sort of like they almost felt like they should get a pass because they're not from the US. And while that's maybe fair initially, I mean, like, they're still a human, and they live in an international world and in an international community. So it's still like a fair criticism to say, like, okay, you get a pass that one time, but you still are a human, you still should be polite and learn about this, and like keep that in mind during your performances or, you know, discussions, whatever.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Briefly?
Yeah.
I would also say that bringing up the fact that inequality and relative privilege is a global thing. You know, global South countries have less advantages than global North countries and blah blah blah. So maybe if you're talking to somebody from another country, bringing that fact up and putting it in a wider context would potentially be helpful.
Yeah. Yes, Ben.
I don't know if everybody here knows. I don't know. It might be helpful to know specifically what was going on, which was that somebody or the issue was people doing performances involving blackface.
Yeah.
And people not from the U.S. being unaware of the history of what that entails in the United States.
Yeah.
So.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And more than I can talk about right now.
But
yeah.
Given that we don't go over that extensively in our normal schooling, it makes sense that they initially wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah. Okay. Sort of over time, but if anyone has a quick question, we can do that.
I'm just wondering, I feel like a lot of this goes into I feel most of us would say, yeah, we want to have better conversations, we want to open up to discussion, but I feel that a lot of people just, if they haven't had the chance to have someone really work with them on that, they might not have the assertion or the vocabulary or something that goes around to the part where we were saying, you shouldn't get involved in discussions if something does happen. And so I was wondering if there's a way we could post something to Facebook or some sort of more access so that people throughout our whole community or who are sitting here who say, well, yeah, I want to do something, but I have X, Y, and Z, and I don't know how I would go about an issue like this.
Okay, well,
or if there's resources that already exist.
I would say there are lots of resources, and I did not have the foresight to put together a list before now, but I can certainly, if anyone wants resources, I can definitely email some to you. If you give me your email and we'll set up a sign-up sheet or something for that. But the other thing is that it really is more important to start the process of educating yourself and continue it and be curious and respectful. It's more important to do that than to have all the right vocabulary right away or to be an expert, because seeing yourself as an expert, firstly, it's just sort of impairs your ability to actually learn, honestly. So the attitude that you go about it is kind of more important than how much you know at any given time, I would say. So I suppose we could post something to Facebook, but I don't know, oftentimes I think more meaningful conversations happen, this aside, in terms of social media, it seems like they kind of just have their moment and they happen. And I don't know how well it works to try and force it. So, there are definitely pages that are for discussing that came out of the conversation that Liz and Ben were referring to. I can definitely resource those. Yeah.
Based on the chart that you showed with the intersecting circles, I think one of the difficulties in trying to assume that I'm not an expert, I don't really know what's going on, and learning more about the issues is knowing when they happen. So there's that whole part of the circle of I've just done something offensive and I didn't do it intentionally. Therefore, I might not be aware of it.
Right.
And somebody might not tell me.
Right.
So I think an important resource would just be, that's the kind of the hard part.
That is the hard part, and that's kind of if that bothers you, that is a reason to just start reading a lot about this, because it should bother you, that you're doing something that hurts people, but it's there isn't going to be a thing that just will go down a list and be these things racist, these things not racist. It's sort of something that you have to work on, I guess. And there's no like easy answer for that, you know.
Right, but I guess what I'm pointing out is like I've been around a long time, and I might think that I've examined that territory.
Yeah.
But in the effort to not be an expert.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of it's a tough nut.
Yeah, it is. It's not easy. So I said like I'm certainly not even close to the most knowledgeable person on this topic, but you know, I think that like anyone can have the right approach to this. You know, it's just like be respectful and recognize that there are things that you don't know and there are things that you should learn. And really just go from there. And like if everyone did that, to be honest, then like things would already be better. You know, it's so just like you can't think of it as like a problem that you're going to fix. You just have to sort of like start approaching it from a different way and hope for the best. You know? Okay. Thank you. Dave has a list now. If you wanted more information, I can send you a list of them.